One more key figure was the Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney. He was there about 6 months ago. He was observing with a, I guess you could say it was a fact-finding type thing. They were walking around, just looking around. I didn't identify the other 3 people with me.
Okay, this is about the time we were beginning to schedule a cutback in military force structure, right?
I believe so, yes.
And they were going to close.
That's when they're starting to close the bases and stuff. That's around the talk of that right there. This base has been here for a long time. Mr. Cheney, his reason being there, I have no idea. I can only begin to just theorize on why he was there. He was, I assume, wondering what's going on. I mean, being the Secretary of Defense and the unique quality of these things, I'm sure they're thinking some kind of weapons they can use or whatever there. I don't know. As I didn't have a privy to any information. They would have to go through 3 gates once you get onto the thing. Once they got through those 3 gates, which I've never been a sentry to those gates. If you were on the facility, you were alright as long as, you weren't putting in, we were just standing there, I guess, for an invasion, possibly, or to make sure as saboteurs, we had orders to shoot, to kill if anything looked suspicious. Anything.
Was Cheney escorted by anybody?
He was escorted by three, he was in 3 individuals, which I don't know who they were with Cheney. There was 2 people from the facility that were there, that walked with him through the complex. He went to level 2, level 1. He did not go to level 3 and 4.
He only went to levels 1 and 2.
Because I was in level 2 at the time during his visit. I was by elevator door number 3, and I watched him go in, and he went into the back building, and we were called up to go guard it into the front of the hangar area as we went up there. So I was relieved for elevator door number 3, and I went over there.
So he visited levels 1 and 2, so he was able to see the spacecraft in level 2
yes.
and the bodies in the cylinders.
Absolutely, without discussion, he's seen the spacecraft. Without discussion, he's seen the bodies too. The 7 little gray people. Now, I mean, just like I said before, I'm on the run, and I know my time's limited, so...
Okay, well, it sounds like you and your colleagues have thought this out a little bit. What is your best goal for getting this out in the open? Did you guys want to put it together into a movie format?
No, we don't... I mean, it's not... We don't want no money. We don't want no publicity, because these guys have families. I don't. What happens to me is irrelevant, and I've always been an expendable, being what I've always done in my life. So it's, but these guys they want to remain anonymous until the time comes. But they don't want no stardom. We don't want no movies. We don't want books. We just want the American public to know that what is really happening behind closed doors. I mean, the government is massively deceiving people, and many lives are being destroyed because of their debunking processes. There's safe to say that there's probably many people in prison on, that have tried to do this before. So we want to take it safe and slow. That's why I have contacted you. I mean, I'm just the first leg of hopefully a something massive that we can bring this on in the open someday. It was very irregular of a military base, and we weren't allowed to go into the parking lot area and look at license plate cars. We weren't allowed to. I think that's why they give you a polygraph, to see if you memorize any license plates of any cars or anything like that. I mean, you're not allowed to keep any notepads whatsoever. The only time you're allowed to write letters or anything is when you're on your own leave. And then you go through a polygraph right when you get there. So if you made any mental notes, they're going to know about it. When we would meet and talk when we were on leave, it was like sometimes they would ask you questions and sometimes not. We took a big chance a couple times, talking about, because sometimes they would ask you a couple questions and you'd be out. And like, did you talk? Did you call anybody? No. All right, go. Sometimes they'd ask you 3 questions. Sometimes they'd barrage you with 30 if they suspected anything.
And all of them had been subjected to hypnotic control. They had different controls, but their controllers knew that either a tone, a flash of light, a touch on a certain part of the body would put them in an altered state of consciousness, and then they could be controlled, instructed.
Or interrogated.
Or interrogated.
They go in a room, they would hook us up to an IV, and that's basically, then you wake up about 50 minutes later and the physical is over. Counting, they tell you count to 10, make it to about 7, and that'd be it. You wake up with a tremendous headache. We were told that if we breached any kind of security system, then you'd be terminated. If you were on the facility and you breached the system, you'd be terminated. Period. They've already done 9 years in covert operations with the SEAL team, so I think they pretty much trusted me in that concept to keep my mouth shut, which I would have. I mean, I don't want to be the one for ringing the bells, but this goes way beyond covert operations and stuff.
Yeah, this was a dangerous situation. They were tempting fate every time. And they risked discovery, and they didn't know what was happening in the hypnotic induction. And he knew.
Now I found out, my last physical, they told me I've contracted a form of Hodgkin's disease, which is a cancer of the blood. To be perfectly honest, I don't know what the truth is or not.
On the last annual physical, done quarterly, after a few days after the physical was over and the blood test and everything had time to get reported back, they called him in and told him that he had a fatal disease that would take him out in 2 or 3 weeks, and they were going to discharge him and let him go home and straighten out his personal affairs before his death. And right away he knew that if he had a disease in the sterile conditions he was living in, it had to be introduced by his own superiors. And at that point he decided that he's going to bring the house of cards down before he goes. He's only got a short time to do it. And they discharged me. He said, for that purpose, he said, I am prepared to bring the house of cards. And then I began to think, well, this got to be a ploy because they're setting me up. And that's why I held off for 10 years, because I had to find out if he was true, if what he was telling me was what he truly believed, or whether he was a plant. But I now am convinced that he truly believed what he told me. If he truly had the disease, it had to be given to him, and if that's the case, he's not going to defend the situation anymore. He's going to bring the whole house of cards down before he goes. I wanted to take him to a doctor and get an examination, but he didn't want to go. He said, I do not want to know for sure. He said, I'm doing this because on the mites, if they did give it to me.
I had to sign numerous National Security Act papers. Polygraph examination, 2 polygraph examinations. I don't know if they hypnotized us or not. Somebody told me that they will, but I never remember being hypnotized, so I could not reveal and say I was or I wasn't. We were told I was never ever to speak about this again, that I could go back into they were going to put me back into the regular Navy. I could turn my time out, but I told them I didn't want to do that because I've always been in the SEAL team. So they promised me that I would be taken care of medically. But I had talked to my other colleagues there at the facility, and we decided that since I'm in this kind of a situation, that I just personally decided that we're going to try to bring it out in the open slowly and surely.
I felt that he was very sincere about what he was doing. He'd been living in a sterile environment. He looked in perfect health. He didn't want to know if he only had a week left. He didn't want to go to a doctor. He wanted to take his own revenge before he died, if what they told him was correct. He also knew that they used very virulent strains of cancer and other diseases because he had been involved in some other operations involving the diseases and accidents too that were contrived. So he knew what was up against, and he feared that that he was the victim. He had saved over $300,000